In June 1940, a young woman got off a train in Buckinghamshire with almost no idea what she'd just agreed to. She was 22. She'd finished a mathematics degree at Cambridge, one of the strongest of her year, and Cambridge had refused to actually give it to her. Women didn't receive full degrees there until 1948. She had done every hour of the work. On paper, she had nothing. A former professor wrote to her with an offer. 2 words of description: interesting work. No location, no explanation, nothing about what the job was or why the country suddenly needed a geometry student. Her name was Joan Clarke. Within 4 years, she'd be helping run the most secret room in Britain. Within 5, she'd be forbidden by law from ever describing what happened inside it. She kept that promise for 50 years. What she signed when she arrived wasn't a form. It was the Official Secrets Act, a criminal law. Break it, and you could be prosecuted during the war, after it. No one told her when the obligation would end, because for her, it essentially never did. The offer, stripped of politeness, was this: you will help carry the biggest secret in the country, and in return, you will disappear. She said yes. Inside was a machine the Germans were certain nobody could beat. It turned orders into gibberish, thousands of intercepted messages a day that looked like nothing at all. The job was to stare at that nothing and find the shape hiding underneath. At first, nobody let her near it. She was put with the other women, filing, routine work, whatever the institution assumed a young woman had turned up to do. She had one of the sharpest mathematical minds in the building, and the building didn't look twice. That didn't hold for long. Someone handed her a real problem. She solved it faster than expected, then the next one. Then a kind of work almost nobody else there could do, spotting a pattern early enough to save the machines hours of grinding. And here's the detail that tells you everything about the place she was saving. There was no job title for a woman doing that work. Nobody had planned for it. So they wrote something else down. She was recorded officially as something she wasn't, promoted in reality, and erased in the filing cabinet on the same afternoon. There was one man in Hut 8 who never treated that as strange. Alan Turing had already noticed her before the war. They'd met through her brother. Now they worked the same impossible problem. Same room, same machine. He changed his shift to nights. She was rostered for nights that same week. It happened again the week after, and the week after that. Neither of them ever called it what it was. On their time off, they played chess. She'd only just learned the rules. Their first few games, he won in minutes. By the 5th game, she made him think. By the 10th, she beat him. They wanted a proper set. There were no chess pieces. Wartime had taken them. So Turing dug up clay from a pit near the park, and the 2 of them sat on the ground and shaped the pieces themselves, by hand, one at a time. He wrote a manual explaining Enigma theory to new recruits, the one people at the park just called the Prof's book. Before it went anywhere else, he gave it to her first. If she couldn't follow a page, he rewrote it. In early 1941, he proposed. She said yes. He gave her a ring. She put it in her pocket instead of on her hand, because at Bletchley, this was one more thing that couldn't be said out loud. He introduced her to his mother. She introduced him to her parents. He told her he wanted children. A few days later, they walked after lunch, just the 2 of them, and he told her something else. He had, he said, homosexual tendencies. In a country where that could end a career, end a life, he told her plainly, on an ordinary path, on an ordinary afternoon. She didn't leave. She'd half suspected it already, she said later. They kept walking. The next day they were back at their desks, on the same shift, working the same machine exactly as before. In the summer they took a week in Wales. A cottage, long walks, no huts, no machines, no war for 7 days. When they came back, he ended it. He used a line from Oscar Wilde to do it. Yet each man kills the thing he loves. There was a week of awkwardness at work. Then there wasn't. They stayed close. In 1942, the Americans joined the code-breaking effort, and Turing was sent to Washington to liaise with them. Before he left, he told her the first thing he'd buy in America was a Hershey bar. Chocolate had vanished from Britain years earlier. He was gone for months. When he came back, he handed her a fountain pen. No card, no explanation needed. That was them, not the version in the film, the real one. Two people who'd found, almost by accident, someone who understood both halves of a life neither of them could explain to anyone else. But the machine didn't wait for any of it. Someone finally sat her down and told her what the messages were actually for. Every ship crossing the Atlantic carried food, fuel, ammunition. German submarines hunted them in packs. When Hut 8 read the signals, convoys could turn before the danger found them. Crews reached port and never knew why. She understood it then, properly, for the first time. This wasn't a puzzle anymore. There were men in the North Atlantic whose survival depended on how fast her mind worked that week. Then, in February 1942, the Germans changed the machine. Overnight, everything her team had learned to read turned back into noise. She sat at her desk. The papers stayed blank. She checked the same dead end twice. Nothing. Turing was still in America. She wrote to him anyway, careful letters circling around a war she wasn't legally allowed to name, sent to a man on the other side of an ocean doing the same impossible work in a different building. She kept working the same silent machine, day after day, nothing. That blackout lasted almost a year. It became the worst stretch of the entire Battle of the Atlantic, the months the German submarines were winning. What finally broke it wasn't a flash of genius. It was 3 sailors from a British destroyer swimming into a sinking German submarine in October 1942, pulling the code books out by hand. 2 of them didn't get back out. The submarine went down with them still inside it. Those books reached Bletchley. In December 1942, Hut 8 read the U-boat traffic again. No cheering, no announcement. People who'd been awake for 2 days holding paper that meant ships would live, and knowing they could never say a word about it. Because here's the part almost nobody grasps about what she actually did. The secret only worked while the enemy believed it was impossible. Every convoy that quietly turned and survived had to look like luck, like weather, like nothing. So she watched ships come home because of work she'd done, and there was no version of her life where she could ever mention it. Not to her parents, not to old friends, not for most of her life to almost anyone. By 1944, she was effectively second in command of her section, one of the very few women to reach that level anywhere inside Bletchley Park. Turing by then had moved on to other problems, the ones that would eventually make him famous, about machines that could think. He and Joan weren't engaged anymore. They were something rarer, 2 people who'd been each other's only witness during the strangest years of their lives. That didn't last either, not because anything went wrong between them. In 1952, Turing was prosecuted for being gay. 2 years later, he was dead at 41. Joan Clarke said nothing. Publicly, she couldn't. The war ended. The silence didn't. In 1946, she was given a national honor for services she still wasn't permitted to describe, a medal for something she couldn't name. She kept working in secret intelligence into the Cold War, where the enemy changed and the rules of silence didn't. She married a colleague, John Murray, in 1952, the same year Turing was arrested. She built a second life as a serious expert on historic Scottish coins. And when people asked what she'd done in the war, she found something else to talk about. The truth about that building didn't reach the public until the 1970s. Even then, 30 years of trained silence doesn't break easily. Some of them never spoke at all. There are people who died with their own children having no idea where they'd spent the war. And when the story finally came out, it came out through a handful of famous men. The women who'd sat in the same rooms doing the same work, including the one helping run the section, including the one who'd shaped chess pieces out of clay with Turing himself, nearly disappeared from it entirely. In 1992, aged 75, Joan Clarke sat down for a BBC interview. It's one of the only times in her entire life she spoke about it out loud. About Turing, she said simply that she'd known him and liked him, and that his death had been a great loss. Nothing more dramatic than that. 50 years compressed into a few careful, quiet sentences. She died 4 years later. Here's the part worth sitting with. The silence wasn't unfair at the start. It was the mechanism. The secret only worked because it stayed a secret, and everyone who walked through those gates understood the trade they were making. That was the job. But what came afterwards? That's different. The state kept asking for silence decades after the war stopped needing it. And recognition? When it finally showed up, it was so late it felt less like thanks and more like an obituary. An institution without a title for a woman doing that work just wrote down something false. Moved on. Because it was easier than admitting what she actually was. That pattern didn't disappear in 1945. It's still there. You see it everywhere, wherever someone has to be essential and invisible at the same time. Your work folded into someone else's credit. A document you signed that outlives the reason it ever existed. Your own life story, and you can't correct it. Sometimes the silence is genuinely necessary. That's true. Most of the time, it lasts far longer than it ever needed to. Joan Clarke helped break the code that saved the ships that kept a country fed and armed and standing. She shaped chess pieces out of clay with a man the world would later call a genius. And for a few months in 1941, she was the only person who knew both the mathematician and the secret he was carrying. Then she went home, and for 50 years, when people asked what she did in the war, she said almost nothing at all.
If you're enjoying this story, hit like and subscribe as new episodes drop every week.